Welcome, guys, to our Sports Frenzy podcast show. For today, previewing the game against with France and Morocco, as well as reviewing that game, as well as previewing Sunday's game as well. So, welcome, guys. Rashka actually making me smile, but we have Arsenal Ham on our panel tonight. We're supposed to have more persons to join in. Welcome, Arsenal Ham to the show. Mr. Last night, boss, all gone.
Thanks so much, Josh. Thanks for having me. Pleasant evening to all the viewers. Well, we're almost at the end of the World Cup. Fascinating tournament. It was one that people were skeptical about, but I think the overall product, Josh, I think it's one that will live long in the memory. The fairy tale run of Morocco is something stuff of legends, right?
Yeah, and it will go down. Yeah, as I rightfully said, it will live long in our memories, and it will actually go down as one of the greatest World Cup tournaments, especially in modern history. And just to let you guys know that we have a poll online that you guys can vote regarding the match for Sunday, the finals. And we are brought to you by Let's Care Medical, located in Mandeville, Santa Cruz, and Montego Bay. So what we're going to do is review today's game, as well as we look about the third place playoff on Saturday, and then the grand finals on Sunday. And just let you guys know that those games on Saturday and Sunday are at 10 a.m. and not 2 p.m. So they are 10 a.m. Jamaican time. Right. So first up, today's game, Arsenal, your team, the Guru, um came out with a 2-0 win over Morocco. Teofur Hernandez scoring in the 5th minute, and then the substitute Randall Colomwani in the 79th minute. What I noticed about France is the same approach that they took, where they really came out swinging, playing the ball very fast, is the same approach that they also took against England. They did that same approach. They played the ball very fast and they catch on the counter and then they score. Right? What you make of that game today? Your team, France.
Yes, just as you mentioned, Josh, that's exactly what happened. France came out and they were able to land that critical first and telling blow, because you figure that if they got the goal, then everything would have been settled in terms of they could then play with a cushion, as opposed to what we have seen in the previous rounds, where Morocco frustrates for long periods. And in the case of Portugal, they were able to get that crucial goal close to halftime, and Portugal just did not look like they were ever going to get back on even keel. And we saw in the round of 16 against Spain that they frustrated the Iberians, and then they took it to penalties, and they were able to thrive there. So the thing about it is that it was a fascinating encounter, because for the first time we saw Morocco playing, dare I say, with the handbrakes down, almost like the team that we saw in 2018. And they are a good team, Josh. Make no bones about that. The thing about it is that people always talk about their defensive solitude. And yes, but we saw in bits and pieces today their build-up play, their approach play, because they're so technically adroit in terms of the individual players, that the issue though was that when they got in and around the final third, they weren't able to fashion any clear-cut chances. And it's telling also that their centre forward in Nesri, he had only 3 touches through the time that he was on the field, which is a World Cup record, because no one has ever been on the field of play for so long. And he was on the field for basically 70 minutes with so few touches. But it's a commendable effort by the Africans, and I think this will put them in good stead. And many of those players, Josh, dare I say, they are on borrowed time at their clubs. When you look at Onawi in midfield, 22-year-old from Angers, you can't see him staying there much longer. Technically, very, very good in small spaces, and he's also a very good progressive passer, and he is also a good 1v1. And Amrabat, we have been lavishing him with praise, and I think all of it is deserved because he was like a man possessed throughout the tournament. So I think that a number of these players have really, really covered themselves in glory. Ziyech, he left everything on the field. And it's telling also, Josh, that you saw where they were so committed. Saiz, you knew that he was injured and he tried to soldier on. Aguerd was trying to make it. He was actually in the official team sheet list to start the game, but he got injured in the warm-up. So I think all those extenuating circumstances, I think I really have to tip my hat to them because even if they had all the players available, you figure that France probably would have been too much. But to see that they were so ravaged by injuries, but put up such a commendable showing, I think it's really, really a big feather in their cap. But as it relates to France, they got the job done. They were on the ropes for a few occasions, a couple of very iffy moments at the back. And Argentina will look at it, Josh, and figure that they can, if they are quick with their transitions, they can get some joy against France because France has shown that while they have the wherewithal in attack, that there are issues in terms of their fullbacks, especially Theo, because Theo is so good going forward. But as opposed to his brother, and we spoke about this on the show, that he's someone who you have a question mark when he's asked to defend. We saw on occasions where they were caught out today because they were ball watching along with Kunde on the other side, and the Moroccans were able to get in behind. But France got the job done, and what can I say about Didier Deschamps? Remember that he's someone who in 2016, after losing the Euros against Portugal, many persons were calling for him to resign, and also because of his stoic kind of play. But he has
Even
gotten the
until now,
results.
even until now, most persons are really impressed with him because
Are not enamored because they're saying that
France
that he
supposed to
has
play
the.
better than
But
Van
the
der
thing
Beek.
about it, Josh, he is someone who he has molded the team in his ilk because when he used to play, he was one of those players who just did the dirty work in midfield, and he would just be a 7 out of 10 player, just goes about his business in a consummate manner. And I think that's what we have seen where he's just really an efficient manager. He is not someone who is necessarily enamored with the style of play. He just wants to get that result. And I think nothing will thrill him more than getting a result on Sunday, despite probably not playing what the purists would say is aesthetically pleasing football.
And what would you say though the approach by because a lot of persons were surprised by Morocco attacking approach, but would you agree that that came a result of France going up 1-0 and they needed to
Precisely,
do something?
precisely. And this
And
is
so
something that
we have a
I
really
keep
good
on.
attacking potent from Morocco, even though we know that they're attacking, but this was very extremely attacking from them today. But
The thing is, Josh, they have never under this manager's tenure, and I'm talking about even when they played the warm up games leading into the tournament, they have never trailed at any point. So
right,
with that said, they have never had to basically get back on even terms. So the state of the game was important when we contextualize things because persons are going to say Morocco outplayed France, but France had that caveat, Josh, where they were already ahead after the fifth minute. So what they were holding on to the possibility of not conceding and winning this game, whether it be by 1-0, 2-0, but if they were able to prevent, and we saw them embrace a more, dare I say, pragmatic approach, and
right.
it did call for questioning because you saw where Morocco grew and grew into the game, and they were suddenly the protagonists, and their quick inter passing was doing a lot of damage in terms of getting them territorial possession. But I dare I say with more ruthlessness on their part, they could have gotten on the score sheet. But you have to look at it on the other side because France also spurned a number of opportunities
Yeah.
because Giroud, I think, could have could have scored at least once today. So it's basically a case where the state of the game, Josh, I think, precipitated what we saw that followed after minute 5.
How would you rate the game though? Because I thought, for me, personally, since the tournament, I probably thought it was like the second
It was
best
a
game.
it was a free flowing game.
So then
It was a
England,
free
France
flowing
won.
game. It was end to end, despite the fact that Morocco not necessarily carrying a potent threat because of their quick transitions and the way how their midfielders were able to play between the lines. And you saw that especially after Saiz went off because Amala came on and Amala is a midfielder by trade. So they switched from a back three because they started with a back three and then, especially in the second half, when Mazraoui, who I think has been underwhelming, yes, he has been plagued by injuries, but he has been played out of position because he's really a right back. And then because Regagrui, who is the manager, wanted to get both Hakimi and Mazraoui Josh into his starting 11, he started both of them. But you saw when they had Atiat Allah on the field, they got more width because he's a naturally left-footed player. So he was able to get to the byline and put the crosses in, as opposed to Mazraoui, who is right-footed and had to always be checking back onto his right foot instead of getting the ball in at the first chance, as opposed to Adet Ali, who we saw in the second half. So I think a number of those factors caused the game to be free-flowing, especially in the second half. And I think, as I said before, Morocco did cover themselves in glory throughout the tournament. Resolute, and when they had to, and we saw that with added pieces in attack, they can be a force to be reckoned with because a number of the players are still very much approaching what you'd consider to be their prime.
And as I mentioned, that a number of the players have been approaching their prime. For the midfield, right? Would you say that Onahi have a higher ceiling than Amrabat?
I wouldn't necessarily say that because you're different type of players in terms of because when I is your quintessential number 8 able to link the attack, but Amrabat does so much and he does the dirty work. So because that's the thing. That's why I don't go
He was
and
all over
about
the field doing yeah.
he,
He
he, he
seems like that
covered
is
he
the player.
covered he covered virtually every blade of
Covered
grass.
every play.
When you thought Mbappe with his searing pace had gotten through, he was the one who made that last ditch tackle. The debate will rage whether it was a foul or not, but the fact that he was able to bust a gut Josh to get back, you really, really, really have to commend him. And it's something that we saw throughout the tournament. So I wouldn't necessarily compare them. They are at different stages of their career. Obviously, Amrabat is a bit more advanced, but there are different types of players, and they make a fascinating combination because they combine to such good effect. And every good midfield has to be made up of players who complement each other because it's not always the best quote unquote individuals, but they have to complement. And I think the strengths of each complement the other. So I think this is just a very, very big step in the right direction for Morocco.
And given that Morocco has been the first African side, right, to reach the semifinals of the World Cup, what do you think this actually means for the continent himself, or you think it's just a one-off fluke?
Well, it can be a bit of both because we saw even Ghana when they played their 3 games, they weren't disgraced and with better decision making. I know we have been saying this about Ghana from the days of Essien and Apia, Asamoah Gyan and the like, and we saw where they got very close. They were a handball away from making the semifinals
Right.
in 2010. So we have seen teams that have come close before. They obviously were the ones who came closest because they actually got to the semifinals. And for large spells today, they were within a whisker of pushing France, or possibly to extra time, and then you never know what could happen if it went to a penalty shootout. Also, Senegal, Josh, quickly, in 2002, they took Turkey all the way to extra time, and it was Ilan Mancic who scored later to send the Turks into the semi-final at the expense of the West Africans. So we have seen it before, so I'm going to say yes, definitively, because also, and this is very, very important, Josh, for the viewers, because we have seen where African teams have dominated age group tournaments. Ghana, Nigeria, They
Yeah.
have dominated. They have performed very, very well at under 17 and under 20 levels, and they haven't necessarily transitioned. So the talent is obviously there because they match up against their peers at under 17, under 20, but the transition sometimes leaves a lot to be desired. But in terms of how they showed up this time around, I think it's a big improvement as opposed to the last two World Cups because even Cameroon, they actually finished with 4 points, and you figure that if Onana had been there, they possibly could have gotten more from that crucial second game as opposed to just getting a point. So I think it's a step in the right direction. But I'm going to say that yes, African teams are now automatically going to perform well. The thing about it, Josh, also is that the next World Cup will have more places for African teams. So with more places, there are more possibilities of them possibly playing better through the tournament and possibly making long runs.
And what's surprising as well, Arsenal, is that Morocco, right? They haven't won an African Cup of Nations since 1976.
Precisely.
Right. Do you think that this team probably might break that long streak?
The thing about it, John, and that's a very, very fascinating question. This is what the viewers should be aware of. Not because we see a team dominate or do very well. We saw Algeria in 2014 giving the Germans all they could handle on the counter attack, where Manuel Neuer had to be prime sweeper keeper because many times Slimani broke that line, right? And they were very, very good. And people expected them with people like Mahrez and the like coming into the group now in the subsequent years to do very well in the African Cup of Nations. But the thing is, Josh, when they play against their counterparts in Africa, they are technical players, but they are sometimes bullied. And I say they because I'm referring to the Algerians, the Moroccans. They are sometimes bullied by the West Africans, the Ghanaians, the people from Cote d'Ivoire, which is the Ivory Coast,
The Senegalese,
Nigeria, Senegalese, because they are robust.
they're more athletic.
They are more athletic, right? So it's not necessarily a case where they will automatically dominate when they go to the next AFCON because we've seen the precedents where teams that were technically gifted are sometimes bullied by their more athletic counterparts on the continent.
Yeah, and I agree with that point because what I realize is that those teams that are normally technically gifted, as I mentioned, Algeria, Morocco, right? They tend at times not to do well in the tournament, and especially in recent times. And it's the West
Precisely.
African teams that
The
tend
West
not
African
to do
teams
well.
usually, and
And
when
they
you
now
look at
come into
some.
the World Cup, and it's like a switch, it's like a flip,
Yes,
right?
because they're playing against different opponents. So and that's why sometimes matchups are crucial. Some persons aren't necessarily in agreement in terms of matchups, but matchups do sometimes play a part because when they play on the continent, they are bullied. The last team from North Africa who you would see would have dominated would have been Egypt. And they had a mix because they had a mix of robust players, but technically savvy players, people like Abu Trika, Hassam, Zaki, and the like in the early 2000s. But since then, we have seen African teams predominantly from West Africa and Central Africa dominate when it comes on to the AFCON.
All right, and I see Michelle here. Big up to our commenters, right? Big up to you, Michelle. Kish, as well as Jermaine Watson, Owen Green, Diana White, Rush Cadillac, Fresh God, you guys, and everyone in our comment section, big up yourself. So now, Mark, right, will go into a third place playoff against Croatia. What is it interesting? Because I haven't seen anybody note it before. I was saying it to Levon since Evelyn that we have two teams that will battle for third place from the same group,
Same group.
and this happened in
And
the last World Cup
and the
with
thing about
England,
it, Josh,
with England and
the thing
Belgium
about it
from the
is
same
that
group, playing
that
out for the third spot.
and it's fascinating that you mentioned that because remember that Belgium was within a whisker of putting Croatia out, right? So it just puts into context that that group, as we had projected, would have been a very, very competitive group because Canada wasn't necessarily disgraced. Yes, they ran their race after that first game because they should have won against Belgium, and in the subsequent games, they ran out of steam because they took the lead against Croatia. But it just goes to show that that group, as we had figured, would have been a competitive group, and it has panned out because that group actually spawned two semi-finalists, and who will, as you say, rightfully play in the third place
Very
playoff.
nice stuff. And many saw that
Uh,
group too, as you said, even though many saw it as competitive, right? A lot of persons also thought it was probably the weakest group out of all the eight, based on the fact that the teams that were there, right, weren't probably their teams are their up to their liking. But it turned out that they produced two semifinalists, right? Turned out to be the most competitive group actually, and that kind of changed a lot of persons' opinions actually about that group. Seeing as
Precisely,
the
and remember on this platform we questioned the selection of Roberto Martinez in terms of
right,
personnel and tactics, and Lukaku takes one of those chances. It could have been a totally different scenario where it would have been Belgium into the knockout stages, and we don't know the Red Devils. Yes, they had their internal problems, but they still had enough quality to make as deep a run as we saw Croatia
they did.
actually make in the knockout phase. So it just goes to show that persons probably weren't looking at these teams because of, as you said, they aren't necessarily teams that they follow. But when you look at how well Canada had done, yes, some persons will say dubious circumstances because we know the qualifying in CONCACAF was changed, in CONMEBOL was changed to basically move from 6 to 8 teams. And we know all of it. We spoke about this on this program. But the fact is, Canada showed up in qualifying, and they covered themselves in glory in qualifying. And also, Morocco had been a team that we saw in 2018 that was, once they were able to sort out issues at the back, and they really sort things out at the back this time around. And guess what, Josh? This and what is so fascinating, probably the viewers aren't aware. He took the post of manager virtually 100 days ago, just over 3 months ago. So it is just fascinating because it's not like he had been, but special mention to Renard. And Renard, for the viewers, is the manager who masterminded Saudi Arabia's spectacular win on match day one against Argentina, because he was the one who basically gave, dare I say, about 90% of this squad their international debuts when he was the manager from 2016 to 2019.
Right. And now we look forward to that game, Morocco versus Croatia on Saturday at 10 a.m. When they played in the group stage, right? A lot of persons thought it was a dull game. The game ended 0-0. What happened in that game is that Morocco had more of the chances, but Croatia, as expected, had more of the
Had more
possession.
possession.
Right. What you think will happen? Because they have to be a winner this Saturday, whether in 90 minutes or extra time. So what you think will happen in this game? Some would say of academic interest, right?
Well, it is of academic interest, but remember that, especially in the case of Morocco, they punched above their
Mm.
proverbial weight class. So I think they will take it as a chance to finish third. This is an opportunity that some of these players will not have again because a couple of them are the wrong side at 30. Yes, the core of the group is still relatively young by international standards. So I think it should be interesting to see what lineup Dalic uses. Does he start all of those older players, or does he put in a few of the youngsters, people like Maya, who are expected to take the baton from Luka Modric in midfield? Does Modric even play on Saturday? So it's a case where at full strength you would expect more of the same, like what happened in that first game on match day one, where Morocco plays on the counter attack while Croatia dominates possession. But Morocco has shown that they have enough to worry Croatia even at full strength. So it's going to be a fascinating game, Josh. I think my issue is I'm not sure who both teams are going to use,
Yeah.
who will be available, because a couple of the players have been patched up and probably have been beaten up, not only physically but emotionally, because in the case of Croatia, people were expecting them, sorry, to have put up a better showing. And yes, we will debate the award of that penalty. I'm not sure what the guys said on the podcast last night, but the fact is that that penalty would have switched the whole mindset exponentially yesterday as it relates to how the state of mind of both teams, both Argentina and also Croatia. So
Because
in
Croatia
terms
was
of
playing
what,
very well up to that point, that
yes,
penalty.
but
Since
but
they,
but but Josh, I will temper very well because you knew that was going to happen. Croatia was going to have more of the ball, right?
right,
And Argentina was going to try to nullify them, and you saw it in the team selection where Paredes was inserted,
yeah,
so that Argentina was stronger through the middle. And I was not able to give my views on the game because I wasn't on the program last night. But quickly, I think Argentina has shown in the last two games that there is more intensity to their play. There just seems to be more zip to their play in terms of how quickly they get through the lines. And you saw that especially on that second goal where they were able to commit men forward and the speed at which they were able to break and the number of players who were attacking Croatia when the play broke down and Argentina was counter-attacking. So it's going to be fascinating. I'm going to go with Croatia, but Josh, I'm probably the biggest Moroccan fan. I just think that they have just so many injuries and they have had to be virtually using the same players, and I think it probably took its toll today
on them.
against France. And also, quickly remember that they would have had a day less as opposed to Croatia to recuperate for Saturday. So it's going to be fascinating to see who is available and in what frame of mind these players are in.
And also with that game, right? Do you think that because it is also said that it's a game that both teams probably would want to avoid or not having to play, and there are also comments mentioned that FIFA says actually scrap it, right? What are your views on that? That they should scrap
Uh,
the third place.
I understand both sides of the coin, and I try to because you see, it's sometimes it's not black or white. Sometimes it's a gray area there, and I understand both sides of the argument, and you can make a compelling case for each. But in the case of a South Korea in 2002 and a Turkey, they they were so up for that game because they were basically entering uncharted territory. I
But you think
think
that
for
is because of their geographical location and the politics involved? Probably that's was the reason why they were actually up for that game.
no, but it's also the fact that these are unfashionable teams, Josh. When
Okay.
you have like the perennial powers in terms of international football going against each other, then it loses its luster. In 2014, for example, Brazil versus the Netherlands,
Netherlands. Yeah, it never
right? After Brazil lost and lost
Civil
so
War
badly,
demolition.
Josh, you just had to put that in, right? After they lost by, I just put badly, after they
Yeah,
lost badly at the hands of the Germans, right? In the aftermath, they didn't want to play that game, and
yeah, they
it
didn't
was
want
at
it.
home. But I believe in 2002, while South Korea would have being deflated, they were punching above their collective weight to get there in the first place, right? Remember, they had to get past Spain in the knockout. So you're looking at a team. They also had to get past Italy in the knockout stages in 2002. So for them, they were punching above their weight. For Brazil in 2014, they just didn't want to play that game because they expect to win. So it's an argument, just as I said, it's fascinating because that for me is where most of the issues lie in terms of the expectations of the respective camps, whether you're leaning to or against it. I think the smaller teams will always want to play in it, while I think the bigger and more heralded teams would want to stay away from it because they just want to get out of there because they have lost and they came to to possibly win the tournament on a whole.
And I'm seeing that we have over 20 viewers on stream. So guys, please like up our podcast and also share it as well and subscribe if you haven't. So all those persons, come on guys. There are over 20 of you on stream and we have a few likes. So please like up the podcast. And I'm glad that you mentioned as well, Mr. Ham, that about 2002 when we had Turkey and South Korea, right?
So Korea.
For the finals, because I was the first that have been talking, especially this World Cup, and that it's actually the first in a long first. Some person are saying it's the first time we've seen small teams getting this far, and I actually had to be reminding persons that it happened in 2002. I think sometimes we tend to forget history.
Precisely. The thing about it, Josh, is that their progression, dare I say, it was met with a sense of skepticism because they were one of the co-hosts along with Japan, and they did receive a couple of favorable calls against Italians and also against the Spaniards in the knockout stages. So yes, their progression wasn't smooth, and people who were around watching it were skeptical as to some of the calls that they were getting. I'll say they were dubious and leave it at that. But yes, they did get through. So this is not a first. So we have had small unheralded teams making it very, very deep into the World Cup tournament.
And as we're about to preview our big game, our grand finals on Sunday, one last question regarding today's game. What you make of Fafana start in place of Rabiot? I think Rabiot was like sick. Yeah, he was
Yes,
sick. What you make of his
along with
performance?
along with Upamecano. You see, the thing about it is that Fofana will not win many plaudits because to the cursory eye, but in terms of what he was tasked to do, he did it fairly well. He didn't pull up any trees, but I think France on a whole, while they will be happy with the result, the performance at times, it was not one that would fill a French supporter with any sense of enthusiasm.
So would you go with
Uh,
Camavinga?
no. If
Why
Rabiot
not?
is if because the thing about it is that Fofana, Kamavinga is obviously the one who is more attacking minded. But you have to understand, Josh, the way how France plays. France nominally plays in with a back four, right? No, it's really a 4-3-3. Some persons will say it's a 4-2-3-1, but they're really, for all intents and purposes, the same. But what I mentioned that is that in that midfield, Choumini is your nominal six. Usually sits in front of the defense. And I say usually because sometimes you find even today he dovetail with Fofana, who does it now at club level. And the thing about it is that Fofana was the one who actually took Choumini's spot in terms of that position in front of the back four or the back three, depending on what is used at Monaco, because they dovetail between a back three and a back four. But quickly, the thing about it is that Fofana gives you more defensive options as opposed to Camavinga, who is more attacking minded by nature. Deschamps himself even trialed it in a game, and he had to pull Camavinga at halftime. While Camavinga is a big talent, there still seems to be a sense of doubt as to how well he has progressed since leaving Run and going to Real Madrid. So massive talent. He's very, very young. He's obviously the future of that midfield along with Choumini. But
Yes, that's
for right now, I think Fofana gives you because Mbappe, Josh, for the viewers, he doesn't necessarily, and I said doesn't necessarily because today was the only time that you can remember him having to play in his half, being called to track back. So normally Mbappe cheats and he normally stays up front and almost becomes a front two alongside Oliver Giroud. So to cover for his inability or his not being required to track back. You had Rabio who would nominally just fill in to help Theo Hernandez, who, as I mentioned, isn't the best 1v1 defender. Anyway, in the event that they are doubled up on. And you saw today many times the pairing of ZH along with Hakimi and then Onawi, they came over and they made quick passes and they were outnumbering the French. So you need someone who has that sense of defensive solitude about them. So I definitely go with Rabiot once he's fit. If he isn't, then Fofana. Kamavinga, I think this tournament probably became one too early. So I'm priming him. If he, with natural progression, Josh, I think 2024 the Euros, he should be the one who is expected to play a prominent role in that midfield. By then, he should, with natural progression, would have usurped Rabiot, provided that he improves as opposed to stagnating, because there is a sense that he hasn't necessarily kicked on just yet.
And I'm seeing one of your fellow French fans, the Django, saying, don't be surprised if Deschamps doesn't start Olivier Giroud on Sunday. Start
There is
Kylian up front
no.
instead
I
with
saw
Marcus Thuram.
I saw the comment, but there is no evidence, no empirical evidence to support that. That seems outlandish. Once Giroud is fit, I dare say the thing about it is that today definitely called for the running of Thuram because France was being pushed back, because we spoke about the state of the game, right? Second half, it was still 1-0, and Morocco was going into the game. They were throwing men forward. And with the ability of Marcus Thuram and Randall Kolo Muani to stretch the play in transition, they were good options from the bench, as opposed to a Giroud, who, you know, is someone who plays better when France has territorial dominance, and then you can play into him and then you can play off him, because his back to goal play is very good. But in a game of this nature, at that state of the game, it obviously wasn't one that suited his skill set.
All right, and so David James bigging it up. Seems that he knows you differently. The guru, David James. So,
Yeah, yes, very knowledgeable is David.
Michelle say I would start Giroud. I also seen Owen Green say Rabiot need to start Sunday to partner Chichamene. All right, on to the game on Sunday. The big finals. You mentioned earlier on, I think in the first part of the show, about Argentina might posing problems to the French defense, right? I am thinking, right? I'm not sure if anybody have that, but if France approach Argentina the same way they approach England, especially the defensive aspect, that is very likely that Argentina will get a penalty, right? And I'm not saying that because of the conspiracy theories out there, the conspiracy theories
Oh,
regarding
you're referring to the individual
right.
yes, defensive issues, because there have been issues, and we spoke about it, and that's it's not rocket science. At the start of the tournament, he started Pavard, he started Lucas Hernandez, who are nominally what you would say are better defenders than Kunde and also Theo. But Pavard did not perform well on match day one, and there have been issues in the camp. As it relates to Theo, we know of how swashbuckling he is, but he's very tempestuous, gave away a clear penalty against Mason Mount, had a couple iffy moments against England, and for the most part has been one who you would see hasn't necessarily pulled up trees from a defensive perspective. But what you saw today was what you're going to get from him. He contributes in the final third, and that's what. And we saw where he was the one who scored against Belgium in the Nations League last year, later on to win that very interesting game. So the thing about it, Josh, yes, Argentina will, but state of the game again, Josh. Remember, France came out and they were the protagonists against England. They got the goal, and then England grew into the game. So when they start on even keel, you expect France to have more of the possession, because Argentina under Scaloni, they aren't necessarily a possession-based team, But what I'll say to the viewers is that this Argentinian team, they have an intensity about them. When you look at the players, they have an edge to them. They are ferocious fighters. They are players who, yes, they do
Would you
questionable
say that
things.
they're very adaptable, given that the coach, what I like about the coach for Argentina as well, he tends to adapt to each side
He
that his
does.
team is playing, right?
He
Even
does.
if
He
he
does.
changes the formation, he always tend to adapt throughout the tournament. Actually what I'm seeing from him, right?
He
Given that
does.
many Argentine fans did not really rate him, but based on what I'm seeing, I think he's actually a good coach and in what he's doing actually.
Very good coach. The thing about it, Josh, he's not one who is afraid to make changes. When you look
Right.
at some of the players who have been inserted, McAllister is 23, Julian Alvarez is 22, Enzo is 21, right? So it is not necessarily the same team per se. Yes, the same group for the most part that would have been around over that protracted unbeaten run, but a number of key pieces have been included. A number of players have been injured. In the case of Aguero, we know he had to retire, and he has adapted. We saw against the Dutch what he did. He switched to a back three to start the game, and that was with two things in mind. He could get his wing backs high up the pitch, and he could also, by extension, pin back the Dutch wing backs. So people like Blind and also Dumfries on the other side, who were so instrumental against the US, they were nullified. And also Molina, the right wing back, was the one who got on the end of Messi's slide rule pass to put the Argentinians up 1-0. And Acuna, the left wing back, was the one who won that penalty against Dumfries to 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 basically show that yes, Scaloni's tactics they were good on the day. And as you mentioned, Josh, she's someone who isn't afraid to effect changes. So for the youngest manager at the World Cup, I think he has done very, very well. Also, I have to tip my hat also to Deschamps because Deschamps, remember, this is a squad, Josh, that has been ravaged by injuries. 7 players who you figure would have either started or played prominent roles who had to pull out for some reason or the other. In the case of Lucas, yes, he played in the first game, but he played basically 10 minutes, and then his World Cup and his season was tragically over with that ACL. And then for a team to be missing the reigning Ballon d'Or winner, to be missing the access of that midfield, because remember, none of those midfielders who started the World Cup final. We're talking about Matuidi, who is now retired. We're talking about people like Pogba, Kante, they aren't featured. So this is a new group. And remember that Deschamps didn't necessarily cover himself in glory because people like Rollin were questioning, people like David were, and these are ardent French supporters. They were questioning him, Josh, when it came about in terms of the Nation League. And I was always saying that yes, are losing these games, but France has the wherewithal. And this was even before these players got injured. And then when they got injured, I was still confident because I knew the quality and the depth of the squad that they still had very good pieces. And Josh, on this very program, I mentioned that Griezmann would have been arguably the most important player because you expect Mbappe and Giroud to come to the party. And I said Griezmann and to a lesser extent Dembele because we didn't know what sort of form Griezmann would enter the tournament. This is a player who has fallen off the proverbial cliff since the last time we saw him in 2018. Didn't make it at Camp Nou with Barcelona. Had to go back to the Wanda Metropolitano, basically like a dog with his leg firm with his tail firmly between his legs. So far he had fallen. Had to basically play a restricted role, and now he has morphed into this midfielder. So both coaches, Josh, I think big credit to them because they have shown the ability to make changes both tactically and also in terms of personnel.
And he has done very, very well for France. I think Griezmann performance has actually surprised most persons, given the form that he was in, as well as the politics surrounding his loan agreement at Atletico Madrid. A lot of persons never expect Griezmann to
And quickly, Josh, just for the
leave this
viewers,
world.
this is a player who, when he started at Real Sociedad, when he was at Anoeta, he was really a wide player who was known for his pace, and then he became a goal scorer inside forward. He has sometimes played at Atletico as a false nine, sometimes played in behind Diego Costa. So he is someone who has played in a myriad of positions, and now he's playing almost like a midfielder because he's making tackles, he is breaking the lines with his passes, and he hardly scores or looks like he's going to score unless it's a dead ball nowadays. But he has been a revelation, and as you mentioned, this is a player who many persons had a question mark. Dare I say, people like Rollin Polly were questioning him and were pitching for Christopher Nkunku. Such was the form of both entering the tournament. And yes, you could make a compelling case for Nkunku because he has been lights out for Leipzig both last season and more importantly this season, right on the cusp of the World Cup. He was banging form, scoring goals in the Champions League and also in the Bundesliga. So I think this is special mention to Antoine Griezmann. I think going into today's game, he was just behind Lionel Messi in terms of clear chances created over the tournament. And I dare say, with the playing of the game today, I think he would have nudged ahead of the Argentinian captain because I figure that he would have created a couple of chances today throughout the time when he was on the pitch.
And as you mentioned earlier on, Ham, that with all these players out, Pogba and Conte, Matuidi retired, right? And the current Ballon d'Or winner Benzema not there as well. Um, but aside from him, Benzema, would you think? Don't you think that this like is a blessing in disguise that Pogba and Conte, those midfielders are not there now? Because some
Um,
persons argue that having a new midfield basically, right, and a lot of new players in the team actually creates that even a greater hunger for those players themselves, like Tuchemani. And so you see that they are performing because they were in there in 2018. And probably if France had been back the same starting 11, then they wouldn't have done well as the previous World Cup winners. So changing their
well,
team, right, actually
Well,
worked
it
for them.
it 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 is an argument that yes, we have seen precedents where teams use the same um, core or the same spine and it doesn't pan out. But I can also say that Spain um, throughout 2008 to 2012. Obviously, the big difference there would be Marcos Senna, who was instrumental in 2008 under Aragonés, wasn't there because people like obviously Sergio Busquets would have supplemented, would have gone in instead of the Brazilian Spaniard in midfield. But the thing about it, Josh, is that there have been instances where teams have used the same core and not necessarily win back the World Cup, but also won the regional tournament in the case of the World Cup and the Euros. In the case of
Europe.
Spain, because
Spain did that
they
before.
went back to back to back. I remember that France did it at the turn of the century. They won the World Cup and then basically
One
with the same
Euros.
group with Deschamps, with Zidane, with Vieira, with that crew, with that group, Petit, Djorkaeff, they were around in 2000 to win the Euros when it was hosted by Belgium and the
But
Netherlands. So
some people
yes,
would argue that the Euros is generally like 2 years after the
I,
World Cup.
I,
So
to,
they
to,
have a short
totally,
time span.
totally understandable. So it's an argument that does have some validity, but you figure that if they were fit, then
Yeah.
they would have been the one because you know that Deschamps he really trusts because somebody like Giroud was always going to go to World Cup once he was playing um for any club and yes he has been playing well for AC Milan but he's 30 he's 36 years old, and you figure that he will be slowing down. But he's someone who basically doesn't deviate from the norm unless his hands are tied or his hands are forced. In this case, his hands were forced because Matuidi is no longer there, and in the case of Pogba and Kante, they have been stricken by injury. But as you said, yes, the likes of Chouamini, they have hunger. Rabiot, he wasn't brought the last time. We know of the falling out in the aftermath. He didn't want to be a part of the reserve group that was on standby. So he has that chip on his shoulder. So yes, those circumstances are valid as well. So it's an argument, Josh, that you can look at it from both sides. But both players would have had the hunger for different reasons. Chomini wants to make his name, and Rabiot obviously wanted to make a statement because he would have felt aggrieved that he wasn't in that group in 2018.
What you make of Owen Green comment? As long as Upper McConnell starts Sunday, France have less story. I will start Konate. I see a lot of person, not just French fans, saying that they are not impressed with Upper McConnell
Yes.
performance during this World Cup. So would you, as a French
He
fan, right,
is
would you start
he
Konate over him?
The thing about it is that Deschamps apparently from and the sample size is relatively small, but he tends to fancy Upamecano. But Upamecano is tempestuous, Josh. He is one of those defenders who tries to win the ball at every opportunity. And we saw it against England, where a couple of times Harry Kane was able to use his momentum to roll him and to get goal side of him. And that is very, very dangerous, especially when you're playing on the left side and you're playing with a Theo Hernandez who isn't the best 1v1, who sometimes is positionally insecure. And if in the case that Rabiot isn't there to fill into that space that I had mentioned earlier, where Mbappe vacates, because Mbappe, as your nominal wide player, you would expect him in the regular passage of play to fill in and to help his fullback. But it's almost like what you see happening for Liverpool with Mohamed Salah, where he's allowed to stay up the field as opposed to being tasked to track him back. So many times you find that Alexander Arnold is exposed. Yes, he isn't the best defensively, but this also isn't by just him not being able to defend. He doesn't necessarily get cover. We know he's exposed 1v1, so no one is pretending that he, just like Theo, is the best defensively. But in terms of they are exposed at times to 2v1s as well. So if Rabiot isn't able to play, then definitely I could not make a strong case for Upamecano starting. Konate would definitely be the starter. But I'm just looking at how Deschamps has gone this tournament. But Upamecano did not cover himself in glory against England. I think it was probably a blessing in disguise that he was stricken by illness because you figure that he is someone who plays on the edge. He's almost like a Romero for Argentina. Um, very, very keen at always trying to win the ball. Sometimes defenders are are so tempestuous. You wonder why you're trying to win the ball in an era, Josh, that is not threatening to your team, and then you give away a spot kick, and then from the ensuing passage of play, the ball ends in the back of the net. So there are strong arguments for Konate as opposed to his former Leipzig teammate Upamecano starting on Sunday. I think Konate did very well, Anthony. I think he
Yeah,
has
he
done
did
well.
very, very, very well. I was
I think he
actually
has,
quite impressed with him. So his performance.
and he's imposing, but he covers the ground quickly, he reads the game, and he is less inclined to be rash as opposed to Upamecano, who plays on the edge most of the time.
Yeah, he's very imposing, as I said. I don't know if it's because of his height, but he's very, very, very imposing. I see Michel saying that new players also made France harder to study by opponents. Other teams and coaches didn't know what to expect. Not predictable, which helps France. I think she's
Um,
getting to the point that
I understand that. I understand that. But Josh, Michelle needs to remember that we're living in an age, right? If you're playing
where
on the moon, right?
information is ready
People
available.
know. Yes, yes, yes. So I understand exactly what she's saying.
Yeah,
But Michelle is so knowledgeable, right? I have a lot of time for Michelle. She's sometimes controversial, but she is knowledgeable.
yeah.
She loves the sport. But Michelle needs to remember that yes, while there is some merit to that, teams are now able to get all the requisite data on players who probably have not even made their international bow. Players who have been called up, you can still go and study what their skill set is, what their tendencies in the normal passage of play is likely to be, is he a progressive passer, is he press resistant? All of these things they actually know before these games are played.
And also right, with Argentina now, right? Do you think because no, the Argentina is in the finals and France. I don't really want to go in that direction, and I'm not going to go in it because we're running out of time. But
Mhm.
do you think Messi winning the World Cup with Argentina, right? Would you say that will take some of the pressure? Would take some of the pressure off him in the GOAT debate argument, or would also that add to his GOAT status and compared to others? Because they always use the word.
Once again, Josh, you know, I am black, white, there's a gray area. The thing about
Yeah,
is that you can make a case that yes, but persons are going to say that, well, based on the available talent, not looking at the extenuating circumstances, because I say this unequivocally, and regardless of what transpires
and just let
on.
me just a minute, guys. We're not having a debate about the GOAT. Just let the guys know.
Precisely,
Yeah,
precisely. The
so
thing
we're not
about it, Josh, and I
gentlemen.
say this unequivocally, this is the best team that Argentina has had. And I say team, the squad, the first squad that Messi would have gone to the World Cup in terms of players, in terms of individual talent, you would say that that was stronger than this one.
That's the
But in
2010
terms of
one, right?
no, 2006 when
Oh, but would you
Riquelme was
argue
in
that the
his
2010
element,
one was Virgil?
Riquelme and Crespo.
Chris,
No, in 2010 it was top heavy and they had brilliant attackers, but
but would you say it
they had
come down to the
they had
coach?
nothing else. Well, it was down to the coach, obviously, because Maradona was gung ho. But in 2006, they had a very talented
I
group of
agree.
players. You're talking about people like Veron. You're talking about people like Riquelme. You're talking about Saviola, Crespo, Tevez, Messi. They
And
were
people were
all
not
in
think
their
that
element,
Ackerman
right?
actually dominant
Sorin,
tactically.
right? Ayala. All of these players were around. It was a very good group. But I dare say this team is harder to beat as opposed it's the hardest to beat because all the others you felt like they had a soft underbelly or despite Peckerman's great respect in the game and he had won a lot with those players, albeit at age group level because he won a host of under 20 titles with Argentina. So he would have had those players coming through the ranks. But Scaloni, I think, has shown that he reacts better to game situations than the previous managers, despite the fact that he would have been the least experienced of the lot. And I'm talking about all of them dating from Peckerman all the way up. But quickly, to answer your question, Josh, I think the debate will still rage because people will say that, oh, well, he probably should have won more. And persons are going to say that regardless of whether he wins or not, his body of work. Because the thing about it, Josh, is that um, 60 years ago, and I don't like to compare eras, right? The, the the main emphasis was the World Cup, right? And for some Europeans, like Alfredo Di Stefano, it was in Europe because you know he's Argentinian, but because of political reasons, had to play for Colombia, then played for Spain. Right. By the time he played for Spain, he was past his best, so he didn't get to play at the World Cup in his prime. But when you look at players nowadays, Josh, they play so much club football. There's so much money involved. People tend to put a lot of credence. There are persons who will put forward this argument that it is more an attractive proposition in terms of the Champions League, in terms of the quality of football as opposed to the World Cup. So that's an ongoing debate, Josh. The problem is that you will never have an argument settled because there are so many extenuating, so many variables that can be brought in that probably have not been brought in because I've seen where oral Tracy was saying that in the case of Messi, he shouldn't have waited until his fifth World Cup to be displaying this type of form throughout the knockout stages. And while that is a solid argument, you have to look at the variables that in terms of the previous editions. Probably 2014 they were solid. But
But people will say
in
that he was passing to Ibrahim, who was not clinical enough.
um well,
They
yes,
made, they made that
but
argument about not winning
there are
2014.
there are so many variables because Messi himself missed a chance. It was at an angle
You
in
there?
terms of yes, I'm here. Sorry about that. It wasn't one that you can be clear cut, but Messi has taken a chance like that before. So Josh, it's an argument that I try to stay clear because there's so many variables that can be brought into play. But what I will say is that his body of work puts him up alongside all of those who probably would have won. In the case of Pele, three in the case of Maradona, because Maradona's body of work isn't necessarily great if
Yeah,
you
a lot of
look at
persons don't
for
realize
how
that.
long,
It's
because really and
consistency.
truly, because the thing about it is that for the viewers, because I know we're pressed for time, Maradona turns up in Spain, and not talking about even the World Cup because he got a red card against Brazil in '82 in Spain, right? But he gets to Barcelona in '82, and he is brilliant for the time that he plays. He gets chopped down by Goicoechea, who is called the butcher of of Bilbao, Athletic Bilbao defender who took no prisoners. Like Jamaicans who are aware, he would be like your Mark Hagler Wilson. Tackle hard. Maradona's foot was broken, right, Josh? Maradona is out for like a long period of time. He comes back and he plays in the Copa del Rey final. Guess who they play against? They play against Athletic Bilbao. It's high intense. It's no holds bar because at that time Athletic Bilbao was one of the powers in Spain, right? And you know Basque country, they are very intense when they play. And Maradona proceeds to kick Goicoechea and they start this big brawl. You can go on YouTube and you'll see it, right? Full out brawl. That's his last game in Spain. Goes to Naples. We know he wins 2-0 with an unfashionable club. But when you look at his body of work, it really would have seen the prime of Maradona probably from 86 until 89, as opposed to people like Cristiano Ronaldo, people like Zinedine Zidane, who you would argue that their prime was over a longer period of time. Granted, at his peak, he was fabulous. So the thing is,
Right.
Josh, like there are different criteria that we use
Lose.
to assess these players because Maradona, we're looking at his high, and you're saying in '86 he probably got to a level that I dare say probably only Platini in '84 at a major tournament, albeit Platini was at the Euros, would have played at that level over the course of a tournament. While Pele, you know, he won three World Cups. He went to four, but he was kicked out at 66. So probably he could have won it in 66, albeit England and Germany had made advances and that Brazilian team was in transition because the older players from 62 weren't around and the young players who actually dominated in 70 were probably a bit too young in 66. But we will never know, right? This is all conjecture. But I see that you use different lines of argument to support or to berate these individuals. In the case of Messi, obviously, the elephant in the room is his lack of silverware at international level. But in the case of Maradona, the argument against him is that he didn't dominate for long enough. He would be like a Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho's
Right.
prime probably would have
I was
been
going
from
to mention that Ronaldinho did the
2003, and
same like
that's why Ronaldinho doesn't necessarily factor in any of these GOAT debates because at his best, you would put him up there alongside any player who has played the game. But he really nosedive in terms of his career trajectory after the 2006
people will say they weren't
campaign.
consistent enough.
And he didn't do it long enough because at 26, in in 2006, Josh,
It
Ronaldinho
was
was
26.
26.
So
He
he
was
was
26
actually
years
reaching
old,
his
right?
peak.
And it was almost like
Okay.
like a George Best, who at
Right.
26, you would have said his best years sadly were past him. So we use different criteria when we are. So it's an argument that will never ever be settled. Obviously, if he wins it, then it strengthens his argument in terms of the person. But you have persons who were saying long before that they didn't require him to win any to be factored in. Such was his body of work over such a long period. And we see the same thing, Josh, with a LeBron James versus a Michael Jordan, right? So it all depends on what you consider to be greatness. Greatness over a long period of time or an ultimate high in the case of a Maradona.
Yeah, as I said, greatness over a long period of time, or impact, a great impact in one
Oh,
particular period
but over a short
over a shorter time,
time
right?
frame.
I see David James saying this Argentina team is not the most technical in midfield.
Precisely.
Do you agree?
Yes, but what they lack in and when they lost Giovanni Lo Celso, they lost one of their more technically gifted players because he was able to play between the lines and he had a very good understanding with Messi connecting from the half space into the central areas where Messi can affect the game. Because Messi usually plays in the half space, doesn't really go out to the wing much anymore because he doesn't have the legs anymore. As opposed to his younger days when he would start from a nominal right position and drift infield onto his stronger left foot. So he usually occupies that space that we call the half space. And for the viewers, the half space is really the dimension that is measured from the edge of the 18-yard box to the edge of the 6-yard box. So basically that puts him close to the goal, and then it's usually under. So it's the right half space where he's able to. You saw where he scored against Mexico. He picked the ball up right in that particular pocket of space, and then with one touch got the ball out and was able to fire. So they aren't. I totally agree with David. I said before, David is very very knowledgeable. The thing about what they do, Josh, they make up for this in terms of running ability because Rodrigo De Paul, I think he has had his best 2 games in the last 2 games. We saw where Paredes came in, he gives them an edge. McAllister gives them lungs, and Enzo. What you saw yesterday, Josh, was that you saw where Paredes would be your nominal 6, and you had Enzo, who has the ability to break the lines, and he has the lungs, and we know he's also very able to play as a 6. So he was playing as an 8 at times, and sometimes dovetailing with Paredes. So yes, David is totally correct. But and that's why I said they will give up possession because they aren't a possession-based team, as opposed to probably the teams of yesteryear where you had people like a Riquelme and people like a Veron in midfield. This team is more of a counter-attacking team and a team that relies on moments. They pick their moments. They are a team that is going to have 60-65% possession unless they are playing against a really, really low possession team that adopts a very, very low block.
And just also for viewers, Lionel Scaloni, right? He also was the coach of the Argentina under 20 team once, right? So what I'm seeing is that it seems like Argentina at times go for coaches that
Yes, that would be already in the system
in the
or would be
system, right?
familiar with the players. And when you look at his coaching group, some of those players who featured in 2002 and 2006 they comprise his group because Scaloni himself was there in 2006. Actually played a bit in the Premier League for West Ham. And Josh, probably the viewers will remember this. They remember Steven Gerrard's wonder goal in the FA Cup final in 2006. Scaloni was the one whose poor clearance fell at the foot of of Stevie G, and Stevie G, smashed it past David James
Probably
from
that's the
over the
reason why
years.
he's very tight in his defensive coaching.
Yep, yep. Well, yes. And then he is surrounded by people like Aymar, who coincidentally happens to be Messi's idol because when Messi was younger, Messi had him obviously along with Maradona as players who he modeled his game off. And there's also Samuel, and there's also Ayala. So he has surrounded himself with a group that would be familiar with some of these players, or they would be players who were stalwarts in their time in the Argentinian team. And I think it has put him in good stead. Because remember, Josh, he was really a caretaker manager, and they couldn't afford the manager who they wanted. And they found that, here what, this is um, a manager who seems to be growing in the job, and he has taken to it like Dr. Water over the course of two um, two Copa Americas and this World Cup, they have lost only two games. They lost to Brazil in the Copa 2019 and they lost to Saudi Arabia at the start of this tournament. So they have really, really done well under his tenure.
Right. And I'm seeing that our poll, because we had a poll up on YouTube, we had 42 votes.
Mhm.
52% of our respondents saying that Argentina will win the World Cup, and 48% said France. So I'm
So
going to
that's
put you on the spot
22-20
now.
then.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot now, Arsenal. For me, based on what I've seen thus far, because I can only go based on
What
the
you have seen so
knockout
far.
rounds and what I've seen. I'm giving Argentina the edge based on what I've seen, right? And
The, the
I'm
thing
not
about
a
it,
fan of the South American teams, all right,
Mhm.
generally, because I'm a European supporter, and
I am
I only root
aware.
when the European teams win. But I can only base what I've seen thus far. I just think that France is going to give away a penalty on Sunday,
Now
right?
listen to Josh. Yo, France is going to bring it home to
The-
you. Look.
And
Stop
I
it,
think
okay?
that they are going to edge it 1-0. What's your prediction, Mr.
in terms of a scoreline, I'm not going to give a scoreline. I think France starts favorites. France has more weapons. Argentina, as I said, they have to pick their moments. Thankfully for them, a few players have had better showings in the last two games. Because I think outside of that catastrophic last 10 minutes, well, it really was 20 because they played on 10 minutes extra um, against the Dutch. I think up until minute 80, they were very good. And I think they were very good yesterday, despite Croatia having lots of possession. Only time that they have looked in trouble in the last two games was when they were pitted against the 6'6" Vegas, 6'5" Luke de Jong, and then the auxiliary centre forward who was Virgil van Dijk. But I think they have had a couple of players getting closer to what you consider their best. Rodrigo De Paul, who I think is very, very instrumental. But you just think that France just has a little bit too much for them because uh,
And if
France,
France win that, it will be the first time since 1962
yes,
that since the Brazil 58 62, right?
yes,
That's
and they
that's a long time that
for
has happened.
for the viewers quickly, there have been two previous instances of teams repeating. Italy 34 and 38, and then obviously the Brazilians that you mentioned, 58 and 62. And then Pele, who was the holdover from 58, he played in 70. So you found that because he was just 17, he was still able to play. And in those days, players tended to retire very early because a number of his teammates who won in 70, people like Tusto, people like Gerson, they retired shortly after. In the case of Gerson, I think he had an ailment with his eye and he turned himself in, and he became a doctor. But you find that players nowadays, Josh, they will play for much longer as opposed to players back then. So this would be the third such case of a team repeating. Brazil in 62, repeating from 58, and Italy repeating in 38 after winning in 34.
No rush Kadak, I'm not Damon Shuko Kelly or Demar Nicholson that have boot modes, right? Um but whatever happened in the finals on Sunday, it will be very interesting because you want to see that repeat because we haven't seen it in our lifetime. That's number one. And number two, we haven't seen Argentina also lift the cup basically in most of our
And
lifetime as
and
well. So
quickly and
whatever
quickly, Josh.
happens, it will
Josh
be
is
just
a repeat.
gone.
It's a repeat from the Rona 16 clash in
Right. In
2018,
2018
where
where
it was
France won 40.
a shootout, but France overpowered Argentina, and that was a very very curious game because in that particular game, São Paulo started without a centre forward. There was no Higuain, and then Aguero came on late, scored, and looked like he could have probably played a bigger role if he had been given more time on the field because he scored that third goal. And the last kick of the game, that ball came flashing across. But France had created so many chances before that they really could have put that game
Yeah, a lot of persons were thinking that
to
France
them.
just became too relaxed because they had
Yes.
control of the game.
Yeah,
It was
because
easy.
actually, because France took the lead through the penalty, where we know Mbappe really took them to the cleaners. Argentina went ahead 2-1, and then France scored 3 goals, and it was then 4-2. Could have scored a fifth, and then they gave Argentina some hope because Argentina wasn't killed completely. But it should be fascinating. I think Argentina has improved since then, but France, dare I say, they haven't regressed and they are more potent this time around because last time around, I remember that Giroud didn't even muster a shot on target. He has 4 goals in the tournament, and you can tell that this is a better Kylian Mbappe than the raw teenager that we saw in
In 2018.
2018.
Yes, Michelle, Kems, yeah, Kems had away from the show tonight because Kems and 3 of our analysts last night they predicted Marca to beat France. Kems, Chris Dima. I think Kems said what 3-0, one said
Wow.
2-0, and another one said 1-0. I don't know how they arrive at that prediction of Marca beating France, but I find that very I thought they my thought is that all 3 are Messi fans and they wanted an easier team in the finals.
But
Right?
winning but beating France 3-0, they saw Morocco scoring
Yeah,
three
Kems
goals
had a
in
3
regular
0
time.
prediction for Marcus. In the next 2 had 1-0, yeah. The next 2 had 1-0, but Kems had a 3-0 victory for Marca in
James
90
went out on the proverbial limb.
because they were using the fact that Upamecano would start and he was very bad in the game against England, so they were using those type. But still, I don't. Even if he had started,
But
um,
England,
I'm
you would
not saying that they
expect
would have
Josh.
scored.
So you would expect England to pose more problems than
Denmark,
Morocco over the course of 90 minutes because one, their style of play and the options that England has in attack and also in midfield in terms of runners who are able to get beyond. Because for all of Morocco's um, good approach play today, you didn't see any of their midfielders getting beyond in misery. So it was always in front. Those nice little patterns and their ability to play out of pressure, but they weren't able to get beyond the French backline. So it was bemusing, but it's bemusing to me, to hear that Kems had said at 3-0.
3-0,
You
yeah.
probably could have seen a 1-0 where
Yeah.
they nick one like what they did against Portugal and they hold on. But 3-0, I think that
3
was
0.
stretching it.
And I said it from the beginning of the tournament when a lot of persons, when Saudi Arabia had beaten Argentina, right? I did say it to some person, then they were at few upset with Germany as well, losing to Japan. I've always stated that the cream always rise to the tops. And what I actually meant by that then and now is that you will always see former World Cup winners in the finals of World Cup. Um, are teams actually that normally have a pedigree or history like the Netherlands and Croatia from Yugoslavia days. So you always find those same group of teams always making it to the finals, right?
Because remember, because Josh, because just to augment that point quickly, many Jamaicans remember that group that we were drawn in 1998. We had Argentina, we had Croatia, we had Japan, and ourselves, right? And for the World Cup purposes, we were 3 debutants. But Croatia, as you rightfully alluded to, some of those players had actually played in the World Cup in 1990, right? And for the viewers, in 1990, they were, along with the Dutch, one of the favorites going into that tournament. Both teams imploded because if you remember, Josh, and I know that you know this because you're a historian like myself. These 2 teams, they have long-rooted internal problems because in the case of the Dutch, you used to find
Right.
that the white players used to be against the black players because a number of those black players weren't necessarily born in the Netherlands; they were born in the ABC Islands, born in Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao,
And as you
right?
mentioned, the Netherlands, I think one of the Netherlands player around that time was the Ballon d'Or winner 2 consecutive years.
Marco van Basten,
1988, Marco, right?
Marco van
Marco van
Basten,
Basten. And they
and
won the Euros in 1988.
Guess who won it in '87? Ruud Gullit. You understand? He
Rude
was the
do it,
captain,
right?
right?
Rude do it, right?
He had Frank Rijkaard, right? So it was a proper team, and it's a team that won the Euros. That was prime Ronald Koeman. So we're talking about, and then when you look on the Yugoslavian team, you had people like Dragan Stojkovic, who coincidentally is the manager of Serbia, right? He is a Serb, but you had people like Prosinecki, who actually scored against Jamaica in '98, who was on that team. You had Savicevic, who was also Serbian, right? Who was considered to be on the level of any player in Europe at the start of the 1990s. So they have always had very, very good players, as you said. They were just playing under the banner of Yugoslavia. But once they got to the World Cup in '98, those were top players. Boban was the midfield general. He's the captain of Croatia in '98. He was the midfield general for, dare I say, none other than AC Milan, who was the strongest team over the last 10 years in Europe at the time, because they had won 3 European titles in a very,
That's the
very
upon
short
saying
span.
Boban, yes, yeah, thing for play for Yugoslavia, yes.
No, yes, and then he played, he captained Croatia. So they have always had very, very good players, as you mentioned. So these are teams that they usually are in and around at the business end of these tournaments because of the quality of players and because of their history. So it's no surprise to
Right.
see these teams still in the likes of Argentina and also France. England did fairly well. Brazil, you figured if they weren't so naive
Right.
late on, they could have
Yeah,
been in the
England
semifinals.
has
So,
lost 7 quarterfinals. They are actually a quarterfinal specialist.
wow.
Most by any
but
big teams.
but but the
But
Brazilians are
anyway,
going to tell you, Josh, that they have won the most World Cups. They have won 5.
you go again?
I'm saying the Brazilians, despite the fact that they
Yes.
went out, and you do not hesitate to to revel in their misery.
Yeah,
They they
I
will
know.
they,
Yeah,
they,
if
they
World
will
Cup, I
keep
will
on
understand the
reminding
team
you
up.
that they have won the
5.
most World Cups, and they are still at
Yes.
5, while Germany and Italy are still on 4.
So Brazil will still preserve that lead with 5 titles. So final word from you, Mr. Before we wrap up.
As I said before, Josh, it has been a fascinating World Cup. It is a World Cup which is unique because of where it was held and the time it was held. But the timing, none of our players got injured before the start of the World Cup. But it can be argued that the quality of football on show has been such because most of these players would have gotten to the World Cup in what you consider to be tip-top shape, because it's not the end of the season where they would have been beaten up because they had to play 50-odd games for those teams that were competing on the domestic front in the Champions League, in the various cup competitions, right? Because on average, Manchester City players play 38 Premier League games. They play in the Carabao Cup. They play in the FA Cup. Well, albeit in the later stages, they play in the Champions League. So you find that they routinely play 50 plus games. And this is not confined to the Manchester City. I just use them as an example. Real Madrid will have players playing lots of games. All of these big teams, right, Josh? So you find that a number of these players got to the tournament in what you'd consider to be very, very good shape. And I think the football on show has been very, very good. The smaller teams, they continue to close the gap. We saw a couple of games where the scores were lopsided, but for the most part, most of the games were very, very competitive. And it was one that was filled with intrigue. And it was one of those tournaments, Josh, where on the last day, on the last match day in the group stages, all the teams had something to play for in whether to win the
Yeah,
group,
the first I'm seeing that
or
as well. Basically, all the
whether to
groups
win the group or to actually secure your
second
spot.
place.
Because look at the case, look at Japan. If Japan holds on, Japan wins the group. If Japan concedes later on against Spain, they drop out. So we're talking about that's a knife edge, right? If Lukaku scores one, right? Belgium goes through, he doesn't score one of those guilty chances. So it has been a fascinating tournament, and it's one that will live long in the memory. And for one that was met with initial skepticism, I think the Qataris will come in for a lot of commendations. Obviously, nothing is ever perfect, Josh, but I think they got more things right than they got wrong
that they
this
got
time
wrong.
around.
And to know that ending of the group, like that we weren't seeing this World Cup and previous World Cup, to actually know that is going to change the next World Cup. We might not see those intrigue
Josh,
with 3 teams
Josh,
per group. Then that might be 16 groups with 3 teams. That might not give us the excitement.
Josh, quickly, I see Michelle's coming. Just to get to it quickly. In '74, they really have themselves to blame because they were clearly a superior outfit to the Germans. But the thing is, Josh, what they wanted to embarrass the Germans because many of them, their forefathers had been, dare I say, violated dating back to the Holocaust, World War II. There were a number of players there who, when they were born in the 1940s, but their parents had to flee because of World War II. So they wanted to not only win that game, Josh, they wanted to embarrass
The
the
Germans.
Germans. And what
And
happened is
also,
that
they in 1974 too. You mentioned earlier about the Dutch. I was in some media, some a problem with the dressing room. I was watching this documentary in 1974 too. The players they had a lot of media attention because they were like overrating themselves so highly,
precisely
right?
because
And they were doing a lot of partying
the thing
and
about it, Josh,
drinking before the games as well.
Josh, the thing, and it is reputed that at halftime, Cruyff actually went smoke. But the thing about
Right.
Josh, quickly,
Yes, they said that
the
at the
core,
half.
the core of that team was comprised of Ajax players. Ajax had a monopoly over the European Cup, which has now morphed into the Champions League. We
Because I
know
think we're only
they
in
won it
17
three
now, we're
times.
3 times, right?
They won it 3 times, right? Yes, the Germans were good because the Germans won it from '74 to '76 with the core from Bayern Munich, right? But the Germans were still not yet at the level. So they wanted to embarrass them, right? And they scored first without a German touching the ball. The first German player who touched the ball was Sepp Maier, who, for the viewers, was the German goalkeeper. Picked the ball out of the back and into Niskin scored a penalty, right? And then they wanted to embarrass and they were gung ho and they got exposed and they lost it, right? In '78, Cruyff didn't travel to Argentina because there were threats against his life. They came second without arguably, without obviously their best player
This
because
player.
Cruyff was still, yes, I know players in those days used to retire early, but Cruyff was still 31 years old because he was born in 47, 78, he was 31, and he was still operating at a very, very high level. And so in those two cases, in obviously in 2010, I think the Spaniards were the superior team, but Robin could have won it. So
Yeah.
it's really splitting hairs because remember Robin was clean through on Casillas, and Casillas effected a save that he doesn't even know how he got that ball around the post, and then Iniesta won the game later on. So yes, Michelle is so correct. You figure that they should have won at least one, but I think in the case of '74 especially, I think they definitely were the superior team. But I think, as you mentioned, their egos got the best of them, and some of them they were playing a chip on the shoulder because of what they felt was done to them during the Holocaust and also during World War II, where the Germans basically violated and killed a number of their immediate
Relatives. And also, I wanted to make a point earlier on the last point I wanted to make. When you were talking about Croatia, also a lot of persons don't realize that Croatia has a team, Dynamo Zagreb, right? That normally do very well in the Champions League, even if they don't
But
make it to the group stage,
Josh,
right? The
but
poor
Josh,
Croatian players, they normally give
Josh,
themselves
Josh,
very,
you
very
mentioned that Red Star Belgrade
right.
won European Cup at the start of the
1990.
1990s. So it just goes to show that these aren't players who just fell into Dalic's
Yeah.
arm. They
Zagreb
have
won
been
it in 1967, the Champions League. Yeah.
precisely the Champions Cup. And in those days, Dragan Drazic was considered to be the finest wide player all across Europe as a pure left-footed player. Yes, Georgie Best was more of an inverted winger, but in terms of pure outside left, like he was the best um, in his days. So they have always produced quality players dating back to the 1960s.
All right, so that's it, guys, for our show to tonight. Join us on Sunday, right? Because we will have an early show, likely at 12:15, right after. We're hoping that it doesn't enter extra time, but if it does, then the show will start right after a penalty shootout, or if there's a winner within extra time. But we'll be here right after the game on Sunday, right? So big up again to Arsenal Ham. Um, Big up to our commenters. At one time, as well as our viewers. At one time, we had over 30 viewers at one time. So big up, guys. Big up, everyone. See you guys on Sunday, right? Right after the game. So make sure that you tune into us Sunday right after the match. Um, Enjoy the rest of your night, guys. And I will end the show with our sponsor, Let's Care Medical.